My name is Kevin. I'm 26 years old and I work the overnight shift at a McDonald's in a small town in rural Ohio. From 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., practically alone at the drive-thru window. Most nights, after midnight, it's just me and the cook in the back, and we barely talk because we each stay in our own corner doing what we have to do. It's not a job I'd choose for life, but the bills come every month, and the hours work for me because I was never much of an early sleeper. I've always been a night owl, so staying up until dawn was never a problem for me. On the contrary, there's a strange calm in the streets at that hour that I always found comforting. Or at least I used to. It's been about 2 months since all of this started. It was an ordinary Thursday, probably around 2 a.m., and I was leaning against the drive-thru counter half asleep on my feet when the sensor went off, letting me know a car had pulled into the lane. I straightened up, put on my headset, and went to take the order. The voice on the other end was male, calm, nothing special about it. The order was completely ordinary too. 2 McChickens, a large fry, and an orange juice. I logged it in the system, confirmed the total, and asked him to pull up to the payment window. When the car pulled up, I was already standing there with the card reader in hand. The windows were tinted dark enough that you couldn't see anything inside. He cracked the window just a sliver, enough to pass through folded cash, not even a card. I thanked him, gave him his change, and waited for him to pull forward to the second window to grab his food. But the car didn't move for a few seconds, and then it just drove away. Without picking up the order, I stood there holding the bag of food thinking he'd come back, that he'd forgotten or would reverse. I waited about 3 minutes. Nothing. I ended up eating the McChicken on my break and didn't think about it again. Weird people show up at the drive-thru all the time in the middle of the night. It wasn't going to surprise me. Then it happened again the following week. Same exact order, same time, same dark-tinted car, same way of passing cash through the tiny crack in the window, and the same thing. Paid and drove off without picking anything up. This time I was more curious. I thought, strange coincidence, twice the same thing. But I still didn't connect the dots. I ate the fries and the McChicken again and finished the shift. The third time, that's when it became clear to me it was the same person. It was impossible for it to be a coincidence. 3 identical orders, 3 cash payments, 3 times without picking up the food. I started thinking of all kinds of reasons. Someone testing the system? Some kind of research? A bet? None of it made sense, but it wasn't hurting me either. The guy was basically buying me dinner for free every few days. I started almost rooting for him to show up. It had turned into a kind of quiet ritual of the graveyard shift. This went on for about 3 weeks. He'd show up every 4 or 5 days, always between 1 and 3 a.m., always the same order, always the same behavior. I already knew what to do as soon as I heard the drive-thru sensor go off at that hour. I'd prep the order in advance, collect the cash through the little crack, and wait for him to leave so I could enjoy my meal. It had almost become an inside joke with myself. My mysterious benefactor showed up tonight. But then, on a Tuesday night around 2:15 a.m., everything changed. I heard the sensor, grabbed my headset, and before I could even say, "Welcome to McDonald's," the voice on the other end spoke first. He said my name. He said, "I hope you've been enjoying those McChickens, Kevin Almeida." My last name. I froze. I stood there with my hand on the headset, unable to say anything for about 5 seconds that felt like 10 minutes. I don't wear a name tag with my last name. There's nothing on the name tag except my first name. My last name is not visible anywhere in that restaurant. Not on the menu, not on the counter, not anywhere a customer could see. When I came back to my senses, I started talking into the mic. I asked who he was, what he wanted, how he knew my name. I repeated, "Who are you?" about 4 times, more fear in my voice than I wanted. But the silence on the other end was absolute. Then I heard the car engine rev, and he drove away without even reaching the window this time. I spent the rest of the shift with my hands slightly shaking, checking the empty parking lot every 10 minutes. Something very wrong was happening, and I had absolutely no idea what it was. When I got home that morning, I found a folded note tucked under the welcome mat. Not on the door, under the mat, as if someone had lifted the mat and placed it there on purpose. It was handwritten, firm lettering. "I know what you did. You have 3 days." I stared at that piece of paper for so long the letters started to look blurry. My head spun trying to think of what in the world I could have done. I'm 26 years old, I work the overnight shift at McDonald's, I play video games on my days off, and I don't have an enemy that I know of. I don't owe anything to anyone. I haven't gotten mixed up in anything that could generate this kind of thing. And yet, someone knew my full name, knew where I lived, and had been at my front entrance without me noticing. I didn't sleep that day. I sat on the couch with every light in the house on, waiting for something to happen. But nothing happened. Not that day, not the two following. I started convincing myself it was an elaborate prank from someone I knew, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. On the fourth night back at work, there he was again. This time he didn't order food at all. When I answered, he simply told me to write down an address. He gave me the address before I could say anything. A street on the edge of an industrial district I barely knew. And then he said I had 2 days to deliver $10,000 in cash to that address, or things were gonna get complicated. He accelerated and drove away. I stood there staring at the paper where I'd written the address for several minutes. $10,000. I don't have $10,000. I don't have anywhere close to that. I went home that morning, convinced myself it was some kind of scam, that I'd ignore it, and finally fell asleep from exhaustion. 5 days later, at 3 in the afternoon, I woke up to the sound of breaking glass in the living room. I was so startled I fell out of bed. When I went to look, the living room window had a hole in the middle and a large rock on the floor. Whoever threw it was already gone. I called the police this time. They came, wrote everything down, asked for security camera footage that I don't have, and said they'd increase patrols on the street. They never came back. I've been sleeping with a kitchen knife on my nightstand, trying to figure out what this person wants from me. So far, I have no answer. My name is Camilla, and I drive for a rideshare app on weekends to supplement my income. During the week, I'm a nursing technician at an emergency room, which is draining work. So weekends behind the wheel serve both as a way to earn extra money and to decompress alone in the car, listening to music, without needing to talk to anyone beyond what's necessary. I like driving at night. Always have. The city feels different after midnight, more honest somehow. Less noise, less rush, the empty streets revealing an architecture that the daytime hides behind all the movement. I work mainly Fridays and Saturdays, from 9 p.m. until around 2 or 3 a.m. when demand drops off. The ride that changed everything happened on a Friday night in October. I was already thinking about wrapping up my shift when I accepted one more request. The pickup spot was downtown, on a bar strip, which was completely normal. The destination, however, was far out, a rural area beyond the suburbs that I barely knew, a gated community in the middle of nowhere. The route showed almost 50 minutes. I hesitated, checked the fare, and accepted. The passenger was a woman around 35, polite, slightly drunk, who slept practically the entire way. I dropped her off at the gate of the community. She thanked me without much eye contact. And then I was alone, at 2:20 a.m., on a dark road with poor GPS signal trying to find my way back. I spent about 10 minutes on a narrow road with no streetlights when I spotted lights on the road ahead. As I got closer, I saw it was a car pulled over on the shoulder with the hazard lights going, and 2 people standing on the edge of the road waving their arms. My first instinct was not to stop. I never stop for strangers at night, especially in isolated spots. But as my car slowed down, I saw it was a middle-aged couple, her in a beige jacket and him in a flannel shirt. And they had that air of ordinary, scared people that didn't match any threat I could imagine. I stopped the car about 25 yards away from them, left the engine running, the gear locked, and cracked the window about 4 inches. The woman stepped forward to speak. She had a nervous energy that caught my attention, that agitation of someone who is genuinely scared. She said they were trying to warn passing drivers because there was a destroyed bridge up ahead, that it had given way that afternoon due to the heavy rains over the past few days. She said they had almost gone off it themselves, that they'd braked just in time by a hair. She pointed in the direction and insisted I couldn't continue on that road at all. The husband, calmer, talked about a detour, a dirt road that branched off about 1.5 miles ahead on the left that cut through a stretch of woods and would bring me back to the main highway, adding about 15 minutes to the drive but avoiding the bridge. He described the route with a precision that seemed rehearsed, like someone repeating something they had practiced. I thanked them, closed the window, and kept driving. My GPS showed no bridge closure. I tried to search for information on my phone and found nothing. But the absence of news didn't mean the bridge was intact. Rural roads sometimes take days to show up in the news when something happens, so I was torn. As I got closer to the turnoff they had described, I could clearly see the entrance, a narrow dirt road going into dense woods, barely lit by my headlights, wide enough for one car at a time. I slowed down almost to a stop. And then, I don't know exactly why, but something in the way the man had described that path with such precision, something in the way the woman seemed to be reciting rather than talking, made me stay on the main road. The bridge was there, intact, not cracked, no sign of anything wrong. I crossed slowly, feeling every inch of the asphalt under my tires, and made it to the other side without any problem. I continued to the highway, got home at 3:40 a.m., and couldn't sleep well for days. I kept replaying the scene in my head, that couple, that dirt road, and what would have happened if I had turned down it. Alone, in the middle of the night, with no cell signal, in woods I didn't know. 3 days later, I went back in the afternoon. I needed to see. I retraced my route from that night, in broad daylight, and reached the turnoff. The dirt entrance was there, exactly the same. But there was something new, a rough wooden sign nailed to a tree right at the entrance of the path. Written by hand in black paint, "Dead End." That sign had not been there the night of the ride. I would have seen it. I got out of the car and stood there looking at the dirt path for a few minutes. In the daylight, it didn't look quite as threatening, just narrow and overgrown, disappearing between the trees. But something stopped me from walking in. While I was standing there at the edge of the road, I heard a sound coming from the brush to my right, like branches snapping under weight. I went quiet and waited. Another sound came, closer, and then a complete silence that was more frightening than anything. I got back in the car fast, locked the doors, and drove away without looking back. To this day, I don't know if that couple was trying to rob me, hurt me, or something worse. But I know that dirt path was a trap, and someone came back afterward to put up that sign, maybe to shut the operation down, or maybe with another purpose I'd rather not imagine. I stopped doing night rides for a full month. When I came back, I bought a new dash cam and had additional door security locks installed. I never stop for anyone on an isolated road anymore, no matter what I see. And every time I pass a dirt road going into the woods at night, I feel that tightness in my chest again. I probably will for the rest of my life. I worked for just under a year as an overnight security guard at a beverage distribution center in a small city in central Tennessee. I came in at 10 p.m. and left at 6 a.m., and most of the time it was just me, the cameras, and the enormous silence of that warehouse. The supervisor came by once a week to check everything, but day to day I was completely on my own. My job was to monitor the cameras, do hourly rounds of the exterior and interior perimeter, and log any incidents in the record book. It was simple, repetitive, and most nights absolutely nothing happened. The warehouse had about 750,000 square feet of covered area, divided into corridors of metal shelving with boxes of beverages stacked to the ceiling. During the day, it was a loud and busy place, forklifts going back and forth, people talking, radio playing. At night, with the emergency lights on casting a faint yellowish tone over everything, the place transformed into something else entirely. The corridors between the shelves seemed longer, the shadows at the far ends seemed denser, and any casual sound, the crack of a shelf adjusting to the temperature, a box settling, took on a different weight. For weeks, everything followed routine without any variation. Then I started receiving repeated alerts from a single camera, number 8, which covered the corridor between rows D and E in the dry storage section. Motion cameras go off randomly sometimes. The system was sensitive, and anything, even an insect passing by, could trigger the alert. But camera 8 started calling me every night, always in the same window between midnight and 1 a.m., and every time I checked the feed, the corridor was empty. The first few nights I didn't pay much attention. Camera with a problem, I thought. I'll report it in the morning. But on the 5th consecutive night of alerts, something caught my attention when I reviewed the recording. The alert always went off when something passed close to the edge of the frame, as if it was moving precisely outside the camera's field of view. It wasn't an animal large enough to appear clearly. It was just a shift of air, a minimal variation of light at the edge of the image that the sensor picked up as movement, or someone who knew exactly where the camera ended and was staying right at that boundary on purpose. The following week, during a late-night round, I heard a sound coming from inside the warehouse. It was a drag, heavy, like a large box being moved slowly across concrete. I stopped in the middle of the corridor and listened. The sound continued for about 4 seconds and then stopped abruptly. I went to check the interior cameras. Nothing in corridors A through G, nothing in the loading area, nothing on any of the feeds. I did a complete sweep of the Interior, flashlight on, without finding anything out of place. I logged it as unidentified noise, investigation inconclusive, and continued the shift. But it happened again 2 hours later, louder this time, and followed by a dull impact at the end, like something that had struck a metal door. I went straight to the cameras. Everything normal from 1 through 7. When I pulled up the feed, for camera 8, the DE corridor went dark for about 3 seconds, static, and when the image came back, the angle was different. Not by much, about 2 or 3 degrees to the left, but enough to show a section of shelving that had been out of frame before. Someone had touched the camera. I entered the warehouse with my flashlight and radio. I worked the main corridor slowly, paying attention to every junction between the rows. When I was level with the DE corridor, I clearly heard footsteps about 2 aisles over. They were a person's footsteps, with that specific rhythm of someone walking, not the irregular beat of an animal. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I stood completely still for almost a full minute, breathing slowly, listening to absolute silence. Then I called out loud. As trained, identified myself as security and said the person could step forward. No response. I finished the round without finding anyone, which was somehow more unsettling than if I had. Because I had heard those footsteps with a clarity that left no doubt. Someone was in that warehouse. When they left, how they got in and what they were doing there, I never found out. I reported everything to the supervisor in the morning. Maintenance did a full inspection and found nothing out of place. No sign of forced entry, no missing inventory, no camera with a mechanical defect. Camera 8 was recalibrated and returned to its original angle with no official explanation for how it had been shifted. I stayed in that job for another 3 months. The alerts from Camera 8 stopped completely. The dragging sound never happened again. But every night, when I did my round through the DE corridor, I felt like I was being watched from somewhere between the shelves. I couldn't describe it better than that. It was just a physical certainty in my chest that the dark spaces between the boxes were not empty. I put in my resignation when another job came up, and to this day, I keep thinking about what that person was doing in that warehouse at 3 a.m. and how they got in and out without leaving a single trace. This happened about 3 years ago, when I was 21 and taking a gap year between high school and college. I got a job at a 24-hour gym working the overnight shift, from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was a simple job. Stay in the office monitoring the cameras, walk through the floor every now and then, handle any member needs, wipe down surfaces. The gym ran on keycard access, so members could come and go without my involvement, and most nights were quiet, with a handful of regulars I already knew by face, and some by name. The place was in a rough neighborhood, but inside the gym, the atmosphere was always respectful. It was the kind of place where everyone kind of knows each other, a tiny community of people who prefer to work out in the middle of the night, each with their own reason for it. I'd been at the job for about 4 months before what I'm about to describe happened, long enough to know the routine well and recognize practically every regular on the night shift. It was a Wednesday, somewhere around 2 a.m. I had done all my rounds for the shift, finished the incident report, which was blank as usual, and was sitting in the office monitoring the cameras with a cup of cold coffee. There were 2 members in the gym that I knew well by sight, a young guy who came every week to bench press, and an older man who had been using the treadmill for years. There were literally photos of him in the gym from 20 years back on the wall by the entrance. Both left before 2:30 a.m., and I was alone in the building, or at least I thought I was alone. About 10 minutes after the older man left, my eye was drawn to the monitor for camera 6, which covered the cardio area at the back of the floor. There was someone using the treadmill in the far corner, a man, tall, thin, wearing clothes that looked torn or very worn out, dark pants, a long-sleeve shirt that was stained with something. His hair was long and matted, covering part of his face. He had his back to the camera, but you could clearly see he was running. I pulled up the treadmill number in the system to see the live data. He was going 5.6 miles per hour, fast, but not insane. What caught my attention was that he didn't stop. 10 minutes, 15, no slowing down, no stopping, no grabbing water. I looked more closely through the camera and noticed something that made me sit right in front of the monitor, unable to look away. He was barefoot, bare feet on the treadmill belt, running at 5.6 miles per hour, and his face, the little I could see in profile, was completely still. Gaze fixed ahead, mouth slightly open, no expression of effort or discomfort whatsoever. It became clear something was wrong in a way I couldn't quite define yet. I left the office with the mental excuse that we had a rule requiring footwear on the floor. When I turned the corner of the hallway leading to the cardio area, I stopped mid-step. He was about 50 feet from me, and I could see what the camera hadn't shown clearly. His feet were torn up. The treadmill belt had dark stains that I first thought were shadows, but they were pools of blood collecting at the back of the belt. Every step splattered droplets that reached the floor around the machine. He was destroying his own feet and kept running as if he felt nothing. I yelled at him to stop. I don't remember exactly what I said, something like, "Hey, shut the machine off. You're hurting yourself." He didn't turn his head. He gave no sign of having heard me. The pace of his running didn't change by a single mile per hour. I yelled louder. I kept approaching slowly, terrified but unable to just walk away. When I was about 15 feet away, he spoke. A raspy, low voice, completely without any breathing effort as though he wasn't running at all. He said, "Are you there?" Not to me, it seemed. To the walls. To no one in particular. I kept telling him to stop. He kept repeating the same phrase, always in the same flat tone. "Are you there? Are you there?" I went back to the office. I needed to call the police, and I needed a door between me and that. While I was picking up the phone, I glanced at the monitor. He had stopped running. He was standing in the middle of the floor, still, with his face turned directly toward camera 6. Turned toward the camera with a precision that made no sense, because the cameras were small and not in obvious positions, as if he knew exactly where every single one of them was. Then he screamed. A scream I felt more than heard, too deep for an ordinary person, too long for a set of lungs that had been running for half an hour. It lasted about 10 seconds, and then he sprinted out of camera 6's field of view. I cycled through the camera feeds trying to locate him. Camera 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, nothing. Camera on the hallway leading to the office, he was there, 6 feet from the office door, standing still, looking directly at the hallway camera. The hallway was restricted access with a keycard lock. I hadn't heard the turnstile activate. There was no way he had gotten in there without an authorized card. I locked the office door 1 second before I heard the handle being tested from the other side. Slowly at first, then with increasing force. I called 911 with shaking hands, explained what was happening. They said a unit would arrive in 10 minutes. During those 10 minutes, he stayed on the other side of the door, alternating between rattling the handle and going completely silent. The silence was worse. When the police arrived and swept the entire building, they found no one. No forced door or window, no sign of how he got in or out. The only thing left behind was the blood on the treadmill and on the floor around it, and the barefoot prints leading away toward the restricted hallway. I quit the next day. To this day, I don't know what that man wanted. I don't know how he got into the hallway without a key card, and I don't know where he went when the police arrived. What I do know is that if I hadn't locked that door at the exact moment I did, things would have ended in a completely different way.